All right, so today we're going to take a deep dive into the sometimes kind of murky waters of government contracting.
Oh,
Specifically, we're looking at the GSA's OASIS Plus small business contract.
oh, interesting.
Now, this is one of those things that can be a real game changer for small business owners,
Oh, yeah.
but it's also it can be a little intimidating, right? All the paperwork, the regulations, the acronyms,
It is.
it's a lot.
It's a whole world.
It is. So we're going to break it all down, make it clear, and hopefully by the end of this, you'll know whether OASIS Plus is the right move for you.
Right. So what's really interesting about OASIS Plus is that it's not just another contract.
Right.
It's more like it's a signal from the government saying, hey, we know you small businesses have the expertise we need, and we're going to make it easier for you to work with us.
Okay, so paint me a picture here. Let's say I'm a small business owner listening to this. Why should I even care about OASIS Plus says? What's in it for me?
Well, imagine this. The government needs, highly specialized services. It's like cybersecurity, environmental analysis, you name it.
Right.
Instead of each agency kind of scrambling around trying to find their own contractors,
Right.
they created OASIS Plus.
Okay.
It's like this pre-vetted pool of qualified companies, right?
Yeah.
All these experts just waiting to be tapped.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all divided into these neat little categories or domains, as they're called, based on their, area of expertise.
Like a matchmaking service for government projects.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing it's not that easy to just waltz into this exclusive club.
Right.
What are the hoops you got to jump through to even be considered?
Yeah. No, you're right. There are definitely hoops.
Okay.
First and foremost, you got to actually be a small business.
Right.
But it's not just about saying you are.
Okay.
There are some, strict size standards.
Right.
And here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Your size is classified based on your most demanding domain.
So it's not about the average about all the work you do.
No.
It's like your peak.
It is.
Okay.
So let's say you qualify for 3 domains, but the toughest one, has a size standard of 1,500 employees.
Right.
That becomes your limit for the whole recontract.
Wow. So even if you're doing other things that, maybe don't require that many people, it's like that one thing sets the bar for everything.
Exactly. It's kind of like being judged by your most challenging skill, even if you've got tons of other talents, right?
Right. So let's say I jump through all the hoops, I make the cut. What's the payoff? What kind of opportunities are we talking about?
Well, the potential is huge.
Okay.
I mean, OASIS Plus has no award cap limitation, no ceiling on the contract value, so the sky's the limit, really.
Okay.
Plus, these aren't just short-term gigs either.
Yeah.
We're talking task orders that can last over 5 years.
Wow.
Even beyond the contract's expiration date.
That's incredible for a small business just in terms of stability and growth and knowing you've got something long-term there.
It's a game changer for sure.
That's a big commitment, though, from a business, right? It seems like OASIS Plus demands that you really shift your strategy to make the most of it.
You're not wrong. It does.
It's not just sort of, I'll pick up a government project here and there.
It's not a side hustle. Right.
Right. But there's got to be a catch, right? Government contracts are kind of notorious for red tape and bureaucracy. What are the downsides here?
Yeah, you're not wrong about that.
Okay.
There are definitely challenges. For one, there's this thing called dormant status.
Okay, dormant, so like it's asleep. What does that even mean?
Yeah, basically, if you fail to meet certain requirements, you get sidelined, can't bid on new projects.
Okay, so what kind of requirements are we talking about?
Things like submitting reports on time.
Okay.
Making sure you still qualify as a small business.
Got it.
It's pretty easy to slip up, to be honest.
Okay, so it's not that you're totally out, but you're kind of stuck in limbo.
Exactly.
What about if you make a bigger mistake, something more serious? What happens then?
Then there's off-ramping, which is basically, you're off the ramp, you're out.
Oh, wow.
And that happens if there's some, serious performance issues.
Right.
And then on top of that, there are all these reporting requirements, pretty detailed stuff.
Like what kind of stuff?
Data on subcontracts, executive compensation, even how many veterans you employ.
Wow, so they really want to keep tabs on everything.
Oh, yeah.
It sounds like OASIS Plus is not for the faint of heart.
It's not. You got to be organized.
You got to be ready to dot your I's and cross your T's.
Absolutely.
So, is it worth it?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, the rewards can be huge.
Right.
But the risks are real.
Yeah.
Before you jump in, you got to weigh those carefully and decide if it's the right fit for your business.
Okay, so I'm starting to see the big picture here, but let's zoom in a little bit. What kind of work actually falls under OASIS? Plus, Sam Middish, I know you mentioned cybersecurity, environmental analysis. What else?
Well, there's a ton. I mean, it really runs the gamut. Just in the management and advisory domain, you've got everything from streamlining business processes to long-range strategic planning.
Okay.
And then on the technical and engineering side, you've got cutting-edge stuff like human factors engineering, modeling, and simulation.
Really? So a small business could really find its niche within all of that.
Oh, absolutely.
And you mentioned earlier that there are different versions of OASIS Plus.
Right.
It's not just one size fits all. Can you unpack that a bit?
Yeah, so alongside the small business IDIQ, there are dedicated versions for, women-owned small businesses.
Okay.
Service-disabled veteran-owned businesses.
Okay.
Even hub-zone businesses.
Oh, right. Those are the businesses in historically underutilized areas, right?
Exactly. So the government is really making an effort to,
To level the playing field.
level the playing field.
That's great. But this is a lot, let's be real. I mean, even with those set-asides, it can be overwhelming for a small business owner who's just trying to, keep their head above water. What are some common mistakes that companies make when they're dealing with all of this?
Oh, there are definitely some pitfalls.
Like what? Give me an example.
One big one is choosing the wrong NAICS code.
Okay, those codes that define the type of work you do, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you get that wrong, you might not even be eligible for certain task orders.
So it's not just about having the skills, it's about making sure they fit into the government system.
Exactly. Attention to detail is key.
So I'm sensing a theme here.
Yeah.
You got to really be on top of this stuff.
Yeah, another common mistake is, not reading the fine print, not understanding the contract's terms and conditions.
Okay.
OASIS Plus is a dense document.
Right.
It's full of requirements about cybersecurity standards, subcontracting limitations. You can't just skim it and sign.
So it really is a deep dive. Literally, you can't just dip your toe in the water. You got to,
You got to go all in.
you got to be ready to go all in.
Absolutely.
Wow. Okay. So no shortcuts here.
No shortcuts.
And one more thing. I'm assuming the rules can change, right? Like the GSA could decide to update the OASIS Plus contract?
Oh, absolutely can, and they do.
So what happens then? Do you have to start all over again?
Not necessarily, but you got to be ready to adapt. Make sure you're staying up to date with any changes.
Otherwise, you could end up in that dormant status.
Exactly. So it's a dynamic landscape.
Okay. So I think we're starting to get a good handle on the potential pitfalls here.
Right.
But let's talk about what it actually looks like to work under OASIS Plus Bros. Can you walk us through a hypothetical scenario?
Sure. Let's say a government agency needs a new software system,
Okay.
maybe something to manage logistics. They'll issue a task order solicitation through OASIS, plus
Okay.
outlining what they need, the specifications, the budget, all that. And companies that hold an OASIS Plus contract in the relevant domains, like enterprise solutions or logistics, they can compete for this task order.
So it's like a mini competition within the larger framework of OASIS Plus Cross.
Exactly.
Okay. And then what? They submit proposals?
Right. And the agency, they evaluate those proposals.
Yep.
They look at technical expertise, past performance, proposed costs,
Okay.
the whole 9 yards.
So it's not just about being the cheapest option.
No, not at all. We're talking about complex professional services.
Right.
The government wants to make sure they're getting the best value, not just the lowest price.
Right. They're looking for quality, expertise, that sort of thing.
Yep.
So let's say a company wins this task order. What happens then? What are their obligations?
That's when the real work begins.
Okay.
The company and the government, they sign a task order contract outlining the scope of the work, the timeline, deliverables, all the detail.
And then the company gets to work.
Right. They assemble their team, allocate resources, and they get started.
I'm assuming there are regular check-ins and reporting and that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The government's not just going to hand over the money and disappear.
No, they're going to want to keep tabs on things, make sure everything's on track.
So it's a pretty hands-on process.
It is, from both sides.
The government wants to make sure they're getting what they paid for.
Right.
And the contractor wants to make sure they're meeting their obligations.
And delivering quality work. Exactly.
So it's a partnership.
It is.
A very structured partnership, but a partnership nonetheless.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, this has been really helpful. Thanks for breaking all that down.
You're welcome.
But before we get too deep into the weeds of contract administration,
Right.
let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture.
Yep.
When we come back, we'll explore what OASIS Plus tells us about the future of government contracting.
Sounds good.
Stay with us.
So before the break, we were talking about how task orders work under OASIS Plus. And, it's important to remember, it's still a competition. You win a spot on OASIS Plus CARIC, but you still got to win those individual task orders.
Okay, so it's not like you get this golden ticket and you're guaranteed a stream of projects.
Right.
You're constantly having to prove yourself.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's dig into that a little bit. What makes a winning proposal in the OASIS Plus world? What are the government evaluators really looking for?
Well, first and foremost, they want to see that you understand their needs,
Okay.
that you've done your homework, and that you can actually deliver.
Right. So your proposal has to be more than just, hey, we're great, pick us.
Oh, yeah, it's got to be a lot more than that.
So what does it look like?
Well, you got to highlight your relevant experience, showcase your team's expertise, provide a detailed plan.
Okay.
So it's about painting a picture, showing them how you're going to approach the project step by step.
So it's not just about saying you're capable, it's about convincing them that you're the best choice out of all the other companies vying for that same task order.
Right. And don't just tell them you're good, show them,
Okay, how to do that?
Use concrete examples from past projects, things you've done that demonstrate your success.
Too clean.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then, of course, there's the pricing component.
Right, because you got to be competitive.
You do, but you also don't want to undersell yourself.
It's a delicate balance.
It is. You got to find that sweet spot.
Where you're competitive, but you're also not cutting corners.
Right.
And you mentioned earlier those cybersecurity and supply chain risk management requirements.
Right.
Those are pretty important.
They're huge. You can't just check a box and say, yeah, we're secure.
Right.
You got to actually demonstrate that you're taking security seriously.
Okay, so it's got to be baked into your whole approach.
Absolutely. And then there's the contract access fee, the CAF.
Right. We talked about that briefly earlier. Can you remind us what that is?
Yeah, it's basically a percentage of your total invoice amount that you pay back to the GSA for the privilege of using OASIS Plus.
So it's like a commission.
It is a commission for access to this marketplace of government projects.
So you got to factor that into your cost calculations.
Absolutely, from the get-go.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces fit together.
Yeah.
But let's zoom out a bit. You mentioned earlier that OASIS Plus is part of this bigger trend toward category management in government procurement.
Right.
Can you explain what that is?
So category management is basically about the government becoming a smarter buyer.
Okay.
Instead of each agency doing their own thing, they're trying to pool their resources, create these large-scale contracts like OASIS Plus that cover a wide range of needs.
So it's like bulk buying, but for services.
Exactly. The idea is to leverage their buying power, streamline the process, and ultimately get more bang for their buck.
Okay, so it makes sense from the government's perspective, but what does it mean for small businesses? Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, it's kind of a double-edged sword. Some folks argue that these large-scale contracts make it harder for small businesses to compete.
Okay, why is that?
Because now they're going head-to-head with these big companies, with deep pockets.
Right, it's like David and Goliath.
Exactly. But on the other hand, OASIS Plus does have these set-asides.
Right.
Specifically designed to help small businesses.
So it's not a total shutout?
No, not at all, but it's still a tough landscape.
So what advice would you give to a small business owner who's thinking about taking the OASIS Plus plunge?
Well, first and foremost, do your research.
Okay.
Really understand the contract requirements, the evaluation criteria, the specific needs of the agencies that are using OASIS Plus.
So knowledge is power.
It really is in this world.
Okay, what else?
Choose your battles wisely,
Okay.
Make sure you're picking the right domains, the right NAICS codes.
Right, where you actually have a competitive advantage.
Exactly. Don't try to be everything to everyone.
Focus on your strengths.
Right, and don't underestimate the importance of relationships. Networking with agencies, going to industry events.
So it's not just about filling out forms and submitting proposals.
No, it's about building connections, understanding the human element.
Right, because at the end of the day, you're dealing with people.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for help.
Okay.
There are resources out there, the SBA, other organizations.
They can help you navigate this whole world.
Absolutely.
Okay, so do your homework, build relationships, and focus on your strengths.
That's a good summary.
Okay, good. So winning a spot on OASIS Plus is just the first step.
It is.
The real work begins when you start pursuing those task orders.
Right, but with careful planning, strategic focus, and a willingness to learn and adapt.
OASIS Plus can be a really powerful tool for small business growth.
It can.
Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
But before we wrap up our OASIS Plus deep dive,
Okay.
let's take a moment to reflect on the bigger picture. When we come back, we'll explore what this all means for the future of government contracting. Don't go anywhere. All right, so we're back, and we've really gotten into the nitty-gritty of OASIS Plus,
Yeah.
the opportunities, the challenges, but I'm curious about like the bigger picture here.
Okay.
What does OASIS Plus tell us about, the future of government contracting as a whole?
Well, I think OASIS Plus is it's a really good example of this push towards more strategic procurement,
Okay.
right? It's about moving away from these one-off contracts
Mm-hmm.
and instead, creating these comprehensive government-wide solutions
Right.
that can handle, a whole spectrum of needs.
So it's like they're building this ecosystem
Yeah.
of like pre-vetted expertise that agencies can just tap into
Exactly.
instead of having to start from scratch every time they need something.
Right. It's about efficiency. It's about leverage.
Okay.
Making sure the taxpayer dollars are being used wisely.
And this isn't just limited to OASIS Plus,
No.
Nick, right?
No, not at all.
This is happening across the board.
It is. Category management is becoming the norm.
So this is something that small businesses really need to be aware of
They do.
and figure out how to adapt to.
Absolutely. The days of, relying on individual relationships
Yeah.
and local contracts, those are fading fast.
Okay.
The future is about understanding these large-scale contract vehicles
Mm-hmm.
and positioning yourself to compete within them.
So that can sound pretty intimidating, right?
It can.
For a small business, I mean, it's already tough enough to compete.
Right.
And now you're talking about this whole other level of complexity.
But it's also an opportunity, right?
Okay.
If you understand the rules of the game,
Mm-hmm.
if you focus on your niche expertise,
Right.
you can use these large contracts to your advantage.
Okay.
Secure those long-term, high-value projects.
So it's about being strategic,
It is.
playing to your strengths,
Absolutely.
understanding that the competition is, it's no longer just down the street. It could be anywhere.
It's national. It's global.
So you got to be ready to step up your game.
You do.
All right. Well, I think this has been a really, really helpful deep dive into the world of OASIS Plus.
Yeah, I hope so.
I, for one, have learned a lot.
Good.
And I really appreciate you taking the time to walk us through all of this.
It's been my pleasure.
And for you, the listener, we hope this has demystified OASIS Plus a little bit.
Yeah.
Maybe it's inspired you to explore some opportunities within the program,
Mm.
or maybe it's just opened your eyes to, this whole world of government contracting.
That's great.
Either way, we encourage you to keep learning, keep exploring.
Absolutely.
And remember, the deep dive is always here to help you navigate the complex world of knowledge.
We'll be here.
Thanks for listening.